The Sharpest College Football Podcast. This is our Week 9 preview. Robert, looking forward to this week. If you are new to our podcast, thank you so much. Our numbers continue to grow and we appreciate new people. If you are a continuing viewer or listener or subscriber or whatever, thank you for your continued patronage, listening, viewership, whatever. If you're new, here is our glossary. Take a screen grab of this, save it wherever you do your college football work, and refer to it throughout this episode and for the rest of the year. With the niceties out of the way, Robert, another awesome week. It's been a fantastic season so far. Over-under plays came back to life. Dual model plays still doing very well, better than the total so far. 54 and 32 will absolutely get it done in any season.
Oh, well, for sure, right? It's really good season so far, and again, this is not abnormal. We had a really good season last year on this too. Now that we've stopped giving out random plays, we're just like, no, this is what the model says.
Oh,
Again, some of these are so fun. There was one play we had this week in particular, Northern Illinois versus Toledo. And it was
yeah.
like, oh, it's 6-6 at the end of the third. Oh, okay. I
There
was
you
like,
go.
what's we
Yep.
under 43.5? Cool. All right, I've won money now. So we're now at a point now where I'm just like, I love these dual model plays. And you know what? Sometimes they're wrong, but most of the time they're very sharp. It's they're really good. So I really enjoy them and I enjoy betting them, and yeah, it's been great.
It sounds like also I'm converting you to the dark side of playing unders as well. Isn't that just a blast?
Yeah, I'm really starting to like it actually. I was never really a totals guy. I was more just a sides, but I'm slowly starting to be like, yeah, you know what? And again, it's been like there's been a lot of games where it's like, oh look, it's 3-0 at the end of the first quarter. What was the total? 60. Oh, okay.
There
Like
you go.
it's
Yes.
been, and now shout out to Tennessee for that. That was definitely a Tennessee game. But like it's yeah, like this is really
Yep.
fun. I actually like, and again, it's not like you're just rooting for points not to be scored. It's actually pretty fun. I actually really like it. Yeah.
It, it's a great way to fill in dead periods on a Saturday
Hmm.
where it's just like, okay, here's the under that's really just in hand. If there's nothing else going on, I can just root for 2 yard runs and holding penalties. Um, so, all right. Speaking of which, here's our breakdown of the dual model plays. I actually counted Kennesaw at middle as a loss, even though the closing line was 8.5 and middle covered that. But when I gave it out, actually, I gave it out after the fact. But when I ran the model, it was 10, so I'm taking that as a loss. Oklahoma State, BYU. We'll get into that a little bit. We talked about South Carolina at Oklahoma in part one, which was frustrating. Boy, these what stands out to me are just these three right here. Just the Charlotte Navy over the Miami Louisville over. That was like quick death or quick win. And just the Toledo at Northern Illinois was just like, I don't know. That was just like an awesome I didn't watch it on TV, but just monitoring that on the app for 3.5 hours is just as good as it gets as an underplayer.
Yeah, it was the Miami at Louisville one was so fun. It was like, oh, what was the? It was like end of the first quarter, 17-10. Oh, we're on pace for like insane, and we were right. It was like 52-48 or something. It was like, yeah,
Yeah.
it was a great play on that game. And yeah, shout out to Army for almost not covering the 16.5. We got in early at the 16.5. They didn't actually cover the closing line. So I feel like Kennesaw and that one balance each other out. And I feel like we got a little lucky on Duke, and I don't know what the hell happened with JMU there, but other than that, like pretty much everything else was roughly where we expected it, and we did a really good week there.
Yeah, I will dig in deeper than GMU, and I still don't get that one, even after digging in. That just no idea. My total plays, aside from the dual ones, we'll get into Oklahoma State and BYU. Like I said, LSU and Arkansas did not come close, but man, Kansas State now is just I don't know. I think I've had this is my second straight, and we're going to have a third straight Kansas State overplay here. So don't know if it's the market slow to realize just they're scoring more, or if I'm just setting myself for heartbreak here. But man, they covered that one pretty quickly too. That over. That was I think the total was like 63, so my model was pretty much right on there.
Yeah, it was. Some of these were really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Like I said last time, the sharpest lookbacks, looking back at a couple ones where we were just way off and trying to figure out what on earth happened here. This is interesting. I had BYU as we had that as a dual model play. I also had the under as one of my total plays, and both of them just basically whiffed. We both had Oklahoma State barely scoring here. So where were we off? They didn't pass the ball for crap, which makes sense. They didn't have a good apex coming in, and they faced a really good pass defense here. So this makes sense. I basically, that four seems in line with how good this BYU pass defense is. What doesn't make sense is, you know, they had a GGAB of 190 for the game, which just does not compute here. Their GGAB per game coming in was at 37. BYU's defensive was a 47. This is out of character for this year's team, but if you look at last year, just all of a sudden, Ollie Gordon just came out of nowhere, and all of a sudden, he just is running for 200 yards a game. So this might signify a return. It's just weird when you have such a complete turnaround against a really good defense like BYU's. So something to keep an eye out on here. That's where this went wrong, and it feels like it might be sustainable. Just thinking back to they returned everybody on the offensive line, everybody from that running game last year. So maybe too late because they're 0-4. They had no business losing that game. Just a rough season for the Cowboys. But maybe their offense turns around off this one. What do you think?
It is interesting. I think the model was really high on BYU's rushing defense as well, and really low on Oklahoma State's rushing offense. I think they were bad at passing, and I think they're still just bad at passing. But I think maybe now they're just like, okay, we're just going to fix the run game and just run the ball. And maybe that's where we missed. And I think that's probably where if they're going to improve as a team, Allie Gordon, we our model didn't like him this week, but he was at one point a Heisman. He was a Heisman runner, not the front runner, but up there in the Heisman conversation. And I think this is now just a return of okay, he actually is pretty good. They figured out ways to get him to actually run the ball and score points that way. Maybe they've figured something out. And the thing is, on the other end of that also, because although you're like, oh, 45-13, that's completely wrong, but or even 37-7, but what happens is if you now all of a sudden can't run the ball, like if all of a sudden you can run the ball that that chews up so much clock, and then the BYU has less time to score, right? So it's actually not that from what we expected. Like it is different, but like when you can now see, and I like this the idea of the segment where it's like, hey, if you change, this is why this result makes sense now.
Yeah. Yeah, your model still shows Oklahoma State with not a lot rushing at Baylor. So we'll see about that. Baylor's defense not quite as good as BYU's, but I do like their head coach in terms of finding a way to scheme things up. The other one here, I don't get it. I do not get this at all. When I saw this unfolding on the app, did not watch it on TV. I could not understand Georgia Southern. They're getting 8.5. This is a dual model play. I had JMU by 23. You had them by 39. And it's not just like one thing. Like in the last one, okay, Oklahoma State's offense just went. I mean, this is just like nothing unfolded like we thought. JMU's apex for the game was 40 at Georgia Southern. It makes no sense. I've been on this guy, Alonzo Barnett, a lot this season. He had a great apex coming in, going against a really bad pass defense. This just doesn't make sense. I don't see it happening at all. And then Georgia Southern is just not a physical team. They don't run the ball. Basically, if you average this and this, you should be looking at if they run the ball, what they run the ball. I don't know, but their G gap should be somewhere in the 50 range. And basically, they had 108, which doesn't make sense. JMU's got a really good defense. They have an elite defense here. This is like a defense so good that I like to bet them on unders, which I did here. That covered at least. Although the path there was very crooked, not what I expected. You're showing a recovery here if we're looking ahead this week in the running game. It's your model's just saying JMU is going to be able to run the ball so well that they don't really need to rely on Alonzo Barnett, the quarterback. And you're showing Georgia Southern struggling to run the ball at Old Dominion too. This was almost a play, this game coming up. The line's moved since. Originally, it was a dual model play, but now the margin's like 6. So this, I think, is just one of those aberrations where if I'm judging both teams, I'm tossing it. It's just such an uncharacteristic game on both ends.
Yeah, it was such a weird result. I think we're gonna toss it. One thing I can't help but remember here is that in past years, JMU has always had a weird week where like they like dominant. Oh, what happened in this week? And then I think a couple of years ago they were not nearly as dominant. That next they started fading away. That was 2 years ago, not last year. We're still going to bet JMU because I still think they're a really good team, but I worry a little bit about that. I worry that maybe we've hit peak JMU here. And again, that was when they had Signetti. They don't have Signetti anymore. So I worry about that a little bit. Is this team going to be able to recover from that? But again, I still think they're a very good team. I think, again, they're against SMU, but SMU has fired their coach too. So maybe but again, there's nothing there. I don't know what more you
Oh, they
can
did?
do.
Southern
Yes,
Miss?
yeah, Southern Miss fired their coach. Yeah, Southern Miss fired their coach. So I don't know
I
what
missed
more
that.
you can. I know. It was actually they didn't really announce it much. They said we have decided a change of leadership at our football program. Like
But
announce
they
it.
just like just run. Did they have like the weekly press conference and a new guy came out and they're like, "Oh yeah, no, he's the new coach.
Just change
Oh,
it.
we didn't tell you. Yeah, no, he's the interim."
It's weird. I normally it breaks from other things, but I think yeah, Southern. Let me just check that. But um, let me check. Yeah, I'm gonna have to find it here. I'll find it on Twitter. But yeah, no, I'm fairly sure they fired their head coach.
Yeah, I tend to miss those things if they break out on Sundays because
Yeah. Oh, yep.
I
Here we go.
spend basically
Southern
all day
Miss,
doing this stuff here.
yeah, has lost 96 games since 2011 after terminating Will Hall on Sunday. Athletic director Jerry McLean is aiming to find the man who can flip the script. Yeah, that seems like he was fired. So
Well, that somewhat endangers a little bit the under. I think it's under 4.5. That should be safe though, because they are, yeah, they're 1-6, so they're running out of real estate real quick there. Interesting. That was something that we were saying in the Sunbelt preview that we gave him the Julius Caesar treatment and said he should have been buried already before
yes,
this season. But when you're a broke program, sometimes you have to you can only eat so much of contracts here. All right. The BuckMetrics through week 8, notwithstanding getting ragdolled by Georgia, I still have Texas as number 1 by a lesser margin. I think I had them over the second place team by like a touchdown. Now it's down to 3 points. Interesting that you have Indiana number 1, so you do not have anybody. You mentioned that in part 1. You said, are there any other better teams in the Big Ten? Not according to your model. You have them number 1. You have Oregon number 2. So there's your title game right there. It's already done, written in stone. Congratulations.
and look at that, Penn
Um,
State number 18.
yeah, interesting. Um, so James Madison, going back to them real quick, this is interesting. Only 2 losses this season, and going back to what we said in part 1 about the models don't really care about one loss as much as the repeatable performance when we're talking about USC. JMU 2 losses this year to Georgia Southern and Louisiana Monroe. Not how I drew up their path to 5-2 before the season. I'll just say that's not what I expected,
Yeah,
including beating North Carolina but losing to those two. 3 new teams to the top 25. Navy, not really surprised. They've had just an awesome offense all season. Now their defense is rounding into form. Kansas State, we mentioned, they've been coming on offensively and the last few weeks. Now their defense is shoring up too. And SMU really just now showing the team that we thought that we had coming into the preseason as far as an ACC contender. Without any teams to play for a chance to come in. So they're going back to the old pre-playoff day and just hoping for something dumb to happen so they can clunk into the title game.
yeah, that seems like that's the play here. Yeah.
Anything else on the top of my top 20 here that sticks out to you? Other
No,
than you, for some reason, really hate Louisville?
yeah, I'm noticing that now too. I really don't seem to like Louisville very much, or Cal. Louisville makes a bit more
Cal's one
sense.
sided.
Yeah.
That's all the defensive strength there.
No, exactly. And I think it is what I will say is interesting though is that Georgia is the number 2 ranked team according to experts. You have them 16, I have them 21.
Yeah.
That is interesting. And then also I have Texas 6, you still have Texas 1. So we're like, hey, this shouldn't have happened. We're like Texas should have been the better team and Georgia beat them. And I think people are like, oh, clearly, you know what? Georgia's loss to Alabama was a fluke. They're still really good. We're like, no, they're actually pretty bad. But I think people are like, oh, people are looking at this and saying, oh, clearly Georgia's back. We're like, actually, no, Georgia's not back, but we're thinking this is not good for Texas, is what we think. So there's a bit of interesting on how you analyze that loss. I think people are like, this is good for Georgia. We're like, actually, this is bad for Texas. Yeah, I think it's interesting that we both have Georgia outside of the top 10. So I think that's a non-trivial data point there for that.
When your quarterback throws 8 interceptions in 4 games, that hurts your metrics,
It
right?
does. It does.
Oh. All right. My top 20 offenses, 3, UCF is a re-entrant, not a new entrant. North Texas, I was talking about in part 1, reviewing last week. They're really getting it together, a fearsome offensive team, especially for the American Conference. This is what's interesting, and I think they only have one conference loss too. If I'm looking at teams with better, here are the teams in the American with better offenses. That would be Army. Don't have Army and Navy. And that's it. Guess who's not there? Memphis, like I said. Now Clemson's getting their act together right when I buried them, mostly on the offensive side of the ball, though, which is interesting. Not sure what that's about. They're not a fun team for me to watch for many reasons. They have it going on. So anything stick out here to you on these?
No, nothing in particular. I think it is interesting that USC is a four-loss team, and yet you have them up there in 17, and I have them up there too. I think I have them as a top 25 team. We both
Yeah.
still like this USC team, but they just have four losses, and sometimes the on-field product, like just sometimes the win losses don't equate to what the actual on-field product is, and I think that's the case there with USC.
And since there are many of you who, I don't blame you, watch or listen to this part, but don't look at the reviews. If you're curious about that, look at our week 8 in review and just go ahead to the Narduzzi Award when I really break down USC's power rating versus its one loss record and basically how that one loss gets quantified in terms of when they just fall apart. A couple of offensive team metrics here. Top 10 rushing teams. New Mexico jumps out from outside of the top 10 to number 5. They've played a couple of really shaky defenses lately, but they do have that quarterback Dampier who can run, so good for them. Good year 1 for Bronco Mendenhall, considering how horrible they were. And then Jacksonville State. Watch out for this team. This team, they found a quarterback who can throw. They can run the ball. That week 1 aberration, just horrible game against Coastal is now way in the distant past since they found a new quarterback that's basically been able to carry them. In terms of top 10, Ryan, Syracuse, with all those recruits or those transfers that Fran Brown has brought in and Kyle McCord, with a top 10 explosive offense. Good for them. Also interesting, moving up quite a bit with San Jose State. Now a top 4 team in year 1 of the spread and shred with a quarterback who looked pretty shaky in week 1. Now that can be expected in a new offense, but boy, they've really, really come on. And now you've got Indiana, who's just bludgeoning people, and now they've got this explosive running passing offense too. It's all phases with the Hoosiers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that Indiana team is just terrifying. I've never seen a team that's like that. And again, from nowhere, right? This was a team that was horrible last year, and now all of a sudden we're talking about them as one of the best teams in the country. It's crazy.
Yeah. All right. Player metrics. A lot of these are same names that we've seen before. Referred to this a little bit in our abbreviated pod last week, but Haj Malik Williams, now number 9 in Apex, really got to wonder just how well rounded the metrics would be had he been the starter from week 1 instead of Sluka at UNLV. And then top 10 player Ryan's, the receiving metric, Jalen Royals at Utah State. It just seemed like a matter of time. I think I had him like number 2 or 3 in the Mountain West when we did our preview there. Boy, how's this for a sentence I really did not ever anticipate saying. It just took them starting, I can't even say it without laughing. All they needed to do was start Spencer Petras over Bryson Barnes for this to happen. On what planet does that sentence make sense?
No, it's pretty crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. And then Ja'Cory Brooks for Louisville jumped into the top 10. This is interesting. He really jumps in once Louisville gets Colin Lacey back. He was a big transfer from South Alabama. Really gives them a third option. I think he really spreads out that, really just makes that offense tough to defend. Because the ACC is wide open and half the conference seems undefeated. I think Louisville's out of it, but Louisville can be a menace for the rest of the way with that passing game. One note that I saw too, because this is my first chance to see Louisville when they were playing that Miami game. Like I caught 5 minutes before they went over, like very quickly. Going into the season, I remember thinking that the big concern there is Tyler Shuck's health. And what's clear to me is they just said to him, "Hey, take the sack. Don't even run the ball. You can't hurt yourself anymore." And it's different. He just turtles. If he's going to get hit, he doesn't try to run. He just takes his medicine. It's interesting. So, but that Louisville team is going to be interesting, an interesting factor down the stretch, I think.
It will be. They couldn't get the job done there against Miami. Put up a lot of points against Miami, but they couldn't get that win. And it's unfortunate, but they cashed us the over. But again, I think they will be interesting. Again, they've probably been eliminated from the playoff, but it is interesting though. We'll have to see if they can do anything.
Yeah. Boy, we skipped 1 week of the bum list and look at all the new blood on here. Where do I start? Ben Finley, Akron. What took you so long? That's all I can say for him. Isaac Wilson, you touched on just how bad that Utah offense is without Cam Rising. Although your soon to be daughter slash son will be his classmate in 24 years at Utah. How about this? Joey Aguilar at Appalachian State. Before the season, I just remember reluctantly saying, I guess I'll take App State in the Sun Belt East just because they have the best quarterback. Clearly not. And let's not forget just how bad their defense has been for a lot of this season. JC French for Georgia Southern. Boy, go figure. A new quarterback under Clay Helton struggling. Didn't see that happening, he said sarcastically.
Yeah.
Jalen Rayner, this is just a Butch Jones special. Jalen Rayner was exceptional as a true freshman last year. And I've seen this so many times as a USC fan, especially when you're talking about the Kiffin and Sark eras, not let alone Helton, where you get somebody who's great as a freshman and then they just regress the more that you go on. And here you go. Butch Jones ruining this kid's future. He needs to hit the portal. He needs to hit the portal, and in a big way. Even if it's just, I don't know. If I'm him, if you can take the weather, just go to Northern Illinois. My God, they would kill for a quarterback like this. They would have to. And then Christian Veilleux, I'll go ethnic there, of Georgia State, transfer from Pitt. Forgivable. Not the most talented guy, and let's not forget Georgia State was in a horrible position. They got their new coach, the running backs coach from Georgia, who came in right before spring practice. So forgivable, but boy, a lot of Sunbelt here as well.
It really is, and I think the App State one is shocking. Brad, and a lot of these are really shocking, right? Like Ben Finley, Akron, yeah, okay, fine, we figured that one. Isaac Wilson again, it's shocking that there was that massive lack of depth behind Cam Rising, given his injury history. Like you couldn't try to find a
Yeah,
replacement quarterback. Yeah, Aguilar again, like a lot of your teams there in the Sun Belt just not having great quarterback play this year, and we're seeing that through the week now. With they're playing midweek now, so we're seeing that. But yeah, it's not good for a lot of those teams. They a
yeah,
lot of their better quarterbacks, or probably rather quarterback coaches, have been rated by other teams. I think that's what we're seeing.
yeah. All right. Top 20 defenses. Texas remains number one. Like you said, they actually did a pretty decent job at Georgia considering how many short fields they gave Georgia. And when the other guy throws 3 picks, that'll help your defensive power rating as well. South Carolina just showed that they're capable of shutting down a horribly inept Oklahoma offense. A couple of new entrants in here. Actually, I think Fresno State is a re-entrant. Again, SMU at number 17. This is interesting because their offense is good. Kevin Jennings has been really good once they settled on him as the guy. And one of the things I liked about them coming into the season was they were sneaky good on defense last year because everybody thinks Rhett Lashley, the head coach, offense. They have a good defense. Hopefully, they haven't screwed themselves over and by having now it seems even more dumb. They're being really nicked for a loss at BYU, which is actually standing up pretty freaking well, considering Georgia got absolutely crushed by Georgia. Clemson got crushed by Georgia. So I think those are draws. I can't see basically the big difference in the ratings of those two teams. But SMU, yeah, it's now you got the defense there. Anything stick out here to you on this list?
No, again, Ohio State being up there is pretty interesting. Ole Miss as well. Northern Illinois still being there as well. Even Alabama at 15, they've struggled on defense a lot recently. I think some interesting entrants here. Cal being a really good defense is also a little shocking as well. You didn't expect that going into the season, but it makes a lot of sense. See, they held. We don't think of that game as a good defensive performance against Miami, but for them to stay in that game, it had to be right. Like not at the end, but earlier
Yeah,
in the game, they were shutting down Cam Ward. So again, some of these make a lot of sense, but it's interesting to see again, and also no Iowa here, right? That's It's again, we
Yep.
talked about it's a different. They lost to Michigan State this week, but it's a different Iowa this year. Their defense isn't as good. Their offense is better, but their defense isn't as good. And that's why they're not on any of our lists.
Yeah, I will point out a couple things on that. Alabama was, I think I had them like in the top 5 or 6 just a couple weeks ago. So you're seeing that slide. They're not the same team defensively, although they did play an okay, literally okay Tennessee offense well for a half, and then the offense started to slide a little bit, or the defense slide a little bit. I will also say about Cal, they did have in the preview. I did the one thing I mentioned about them was because they were at the end of the preview. They did return. They had a high improvement metric on defense specifically last year, and with Wilcox, I did expect them to improve. Not this much on defense. This is just a big jump up to the point where I've got them in my top 20 overall, just based on just how good of a defense they are. My team metrics, a little more in detail. James Madison, I don't know. I'm just flummoxed by everything off that Georgia Southern game. Somehow they jump into the top 10. Now, they did play J.C. French, who I think threw 3 picks in that game, so that's probably why they jumped up into the top 10. Interesting here, Tulane, year one under John Summerall. I like this. This is something to really keep an eye on. I don't know how much it means for this season. New coach, defensive mind, already has like an elite unit on his side of the ball. This bodes really well for Tulane going forward. Run defense, here you go. SMU, now top 5 from out of the top 10. South Carolina, I think there's a lot of benefit of playing an inept Oklahoma offense in there. And then UTSA, did not see this coming. This is weird. That's got to be just some kind of a scheduling thing as much as anything else to be in the top 10 here.
Yeah, it really is. I think, yeah, that is a bit of a mystery.
All right. You ready to do some previews here?
Yeah, let's do it.
And before we do, just a heads up, a return this week of Island Time. If you want to go over some more games, what's going to be interesting about that is I found the 5 games where my model and Robert's model differ the most. So we're going to go over those, basically the model assumptions, and our guy Step on a Duck is going to be into and play judge and jury in terms of where whose model he's with on each of the games. Pretty interesting. Got the slides together for that, and some of these are really going to be really interesting discussions. But for the games that we're playing this week, let's start off with the biggest game out. No, not quite. Georgia Southern and Old Dominion. This is barely a play, and I actually think that this is still a play if it's at 2. If you're giving 2.5, it's not a dual model play because we need a margin of 7. What's crazy about this, Robert, is we both have the exact same score of 17-26 in favor of ODU. When I did that look back on Georgia Southern against JMU, I think they just revert to form. I don't think ODU is any good, but at least my model likes their defense too. I guess yours does too. If you have them all holding Georgia Southern to 17 points, I think really the matchup here is like a pretty good pass defense against a really bad passing offense here. JC French kind of stinks. Georgia Southern is not a physical team here. You've got basically twice as many run yards given up versus gained above average, and you've got a positive margin here in ODU. So I think this more physical nature here, and just the only unit here that's really exceptional by Sunbelt standards, if you will, is just the defense here. So if you can get it down anywhere at 2, it's a dual model play. When I made the slide last night, it was 1.5. So shop carefully and shop smartly.
Yeah, I do ODU here. I think this could be an interesting game. This game is, I think, tomorrow, or I could be wrong about that.
It's during the week because these are sequentially.
It's midweek. Yeah, let me check. Is it? No, this is Friday. Sorry, I wrong again. It is Thursday game. Thursday 9:00, 7:00, 7:00 Eastern time. Watch this a little bit before Thursday night football, which is, I think, was not good this week. But yeah, watch it this week.
Not to argue with you, my friend, but this is Thursday night
This is
football.
Thursday night
Let's get
football.
our priorities straight, okay?
Yes, true. That's fair. That's very fair.
All right, next one. I really like this play, notwithstanding what I mentioned about the explosive passing game at Pitt, but not too far behind, or at Syracuse, but not too far behind is Pitt. And Pitt has this proven quantity at offensive coordinator Cade Bell, who's completely turned them around. I feel bad because I can't even name the Pitt starting quarterback, but you know what? Do you know his name? I don't know his name.
Oh, it's like a super long name, isn't it?
It's not the Sun God. It's not that
Oh,
one.
no, it's not. but his name is long, I think.
Okay.
This is how under the radar Pitt is. We don't even know what their quarterback is. We're like, yeah, it's something.
Yep. So we both have Pitt. We have both Pitt in a high scoring affair here. Don't really like the Syracuse offense here. I think that's really because you've got the situation where you've got a very stout Pitt run defense, and Syracuse cannot run the ball. Pitt's okay on pass defense. Syracuse, I think if you make them one legged, I'm comfortable with this play. And again, it's just boy, it's goofy to say, but I really like this Pitt team with Narduzzi. He's out of character. It's like there was one of those body switch movies where he became Hugh Freeze and Hugh Freeze became him. Hugh Freeze, like 2012, Hugh Freeze became him.
Yeah.
You got the Pitt defense. I think that this offense is probably, I don't know, I like it just as much, if not more than the Syracuse. And this Syracuse defense really struggles here. So that's why you're just seeing the big points here. So you and I don't have this close. We have Pitt by large margins, 16 and 25. One of my favorite plays this week, for sure.
I think this is it's because Pitt actually has like a good defense. I think other worse teams have given Syracuse more problems, and I think that's what we're seeing on here.
Yeah, fair. All right. Are you ready for this one? This is basically where you hold your breath and say, does the airplane really fly? Because, oh, I don't know, buddy. And yet you have, okay, Notre Dame giving 12 and a half to Navy. I've got this a 2 point game. You've got Navy winning straight up. Here's my concern. We both do the best to normalize our performance metrics for strength of opponent. It's an inexact science. I think it's the best possible way to do it with the available data.
Especially with Notre Dame.
It's exactly. Notre Dame's played a really tough schedule, and Navy's toughest opponent has been not Notre Dame. I'll put it that way. I don't have their schedule here handy. Let me look this up real quick. Navy's toughest opponent to date has been, boy, this is a who's who of no. Here we go. Bucknell stinks. Temple is like one of the worst in FBS. Memphis, who I just buried in part one. UAB really stinks. Air Force, I've said, is really bad. Now, Charlotte is actually 2-1, so Charlotte's probably their toughest team that they've played. So that's my concern here. So I played this, I think, just a little less than a full unit. And McAfee, thank you. Everybody hates you and your crappy product. Let's get that out of the way. I gotta play it because I can't go against the dual model plays, but I'm playing it for less than a full unit. I'll just say that.
It is interesting. I actually do like it. I think the thing is the way the model works and the way the model physically has to work is that when you have two teams that like are not in the same conference, or well, more accurately, when you have a team that's in a lower conference and you have a team that's in a higher conference. And I think I'm not. I don't remember exactly where I put ND. I think Notre Dame is an independent. It's either in my model they're either an independent or they're in the ACC. Either way, I'm not really worried about it too much because it seems to be able to nail them pretty well. But when you're dealing with ones like that where it's like one is at a lower conference, the way that the model and the way the model has to, like, there's no other way you can quantify this. The way it shows that it's way better than all those teams and comparable to an upper conference is by beating them by a ton. You have to. And this also becomes a little bit of an issue in my League of Legends model because there's also all kinds of leagues around the world, and then they all come together to play in worlds. But the problem is just because you beat up, if you're in a horrible league and you beat up everyone in your league all year round, and then you go play off against a Korean team, just because you destroyed everyone in your league doesn't mean you're at the same level of the Koreans. And this is obviously slightly different, but a similar example in the fact that just because you're way better than all, just because you destroyed everyone in, because again, it's we'd expect Ohio State to come into the American and destroy teams at the level that Navy does. But just because Navy does it doesn't mean they're at the same level as Ohio State, if that makes sense. But the thing is, the model has to work that way because if not, then like everything breaks. You can't just be like, no matter what, this team is better than this team. You can't do that. You have to say that to demonstrate that they're at the level of Ohio State, they should be beating these teams at the level that Ohio State, or again, Ohio State being a proxy for an Oregon or whatever. That's the level it has to be, and that's what the model says. So again, I think that's the way you have to do it. And if we go down with the ship, okay, whatever. We're not putting a more.
The Navy play, I love that.
Oh,
Dang it.
I didn't even
Well done.
realize that. Yeah, that is. Yeah, that's a great play on words there. If we go down with the ship, we go down with the ship. But if again, we're not putting a mortgage payment on this or anything. Again, it's what the model thinks, and I've played spread and money line. Yeah,
Yeah, I guess the one thing that really concerns me too is I think numbers are going to go haywire with this crazy apex of 254, which is just beyond anything I've ever seen before, except for this team in Army. Weirdly, this season only, and that's a function of their ability to run the ball. And I can see Notre Dame being such a better defense than they've played, where basically you shut this down and this goes away, and it can get away from them real quick. That's my concern. But to your point, I didn't play a full unit, but I have to play it because I like to think I'm smart, but I know I'm not. There's no way I'm smarter than my model. It's just I'm not, and I'm not smarter than both of our models combined.
yeah.
So
Also, a little bit under discussed there. Notre Dame far from a dominant team this year, right? Losses to Northern Illinois. They is that their only? Are they? That's only their
that's their
only
only
loss.
loss.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but again, they've had some games where they have not looked like a dominant team, right? And Navy has looked like a very dominant team. So I'm excited to see this game, but
yeah.
I don't think anyone's walking away with this one easily. I think this is going to be a competitive game, and you're giving me 12 and a half. I'll take it.
Looking forward to this one. This is one of those really just interesting test of theories here. All right, completely different game here. Oklahoma State at Baylor. When we did our sharpest look back on Oklahoma State, we covered that. You and I both have Oklahoma State still struggling on offense. I'm a little concerned that they might have found something with it's like they almost took 11 months off and just they might pick it up from last season. But what stands out to me more than anything else is that even if they do improve, you've got sneakily Baylor has a really functional offense here. I didn't really know this or pay attention to it until this came up as a play. If you had told me coming into this game, hey, guess what's the best unit in this game? It's the Baylor offense. I would have said no way. But clearly, we both have that as the case. And even if Oklahoma State has found something better on offense, they have not found it on defense. BYU is at best a okay offensive team, and they just they were very obliging. Oklahoma State was to BYU, and that's very in line with your scene. This is really bad. I just want to say, look, from a personal frame of reference, apparently based on the comments from last year, like the worst defense we've ever seen of all time in the history of football was USC's last year, and they were a minus 3.5. You've got something that's much worse than that here in Oklahoma State. They just don't. They just can't do anything right on defense. Look at this. This is just a horrible run defense. I guess they're not Middle Tennessee level bad in terms of pass defense here, but this is going to be a problem. This is a problem. So even if they figured it out on offense, I think that defensively, Baylor can match them 3 punches to every punch that Oklahoma State can throw, I think, for the most part.
Yeah, I agree with that. I like Baylor here. I don't love it, but to be fair, Oklahoma State did just cover in that last second desperation last week. I don't know. They played a competitive game last week, but I don't know if they can keep that up for 2 weeks in a row. I feel like they can't.
And it's back-to-back road games, too, for them,
Yeah.
too, being at BYU and then now at Baylor.
At a certain point, that takes its toll.
Yeah. All right, this is interesting with you breaking the news to me that Will Hall's been fired about 18 games too late here. That's probably my only concern here because as we talked about in the sharpest look back, that James Madison game last week is just an aberration. I don't see any way that's indicative of what they have. That's just their worst game. Like we said, we're going to write it off. We both have JMU scoring about the same amount of points. We basically have Southern Miss struggling to score. I don't think, put it this way, this is not USC firing Sark in 2015 and all of a sudden it's, hey, we have a good quarterback. We have a good offensive line. We actually have a lot of good recruits here. And they go on a bit of a run there. They went and beating a top 5 team in Stanford under Coach O, or when they fired Lane Kiffin, pardon me, in 2013. This is just okay. There's nothing here to make anything out of. Your best thing is Tate Rodemaker. Awesome. He's got a 79 apex. Maybe the new guy can get him up to 80. Not going to help against this defense here. I think Chesney, the head coach, is a really a good coach. He's going to fix whatever happened and went wrong last week. Just JMU is just so much better than Southern Miss. I think JMU comes off of a tough road loss like that. I think that they're just one. I can see them just basically just making a statement and just trying to make it like 42-0 at half.
Yeah, again, JMU is gonna. You're up against a pissed off JMU team that lost last game. My biggest concern, and you make the point about the talent level, and I agree with that sentiment, but at the same time, I also have concerns about the coaching talent, right? Oh, okay, you fired your head coach. Who's left? What? No, is it partly a joke, but also like they've anybody who's been any even remotely good has been picked off from this program over the past years, right? I think at one point
Yeah.
they fired they picked off the defensive coordinator. Florida got the defensive coordinator one time a couple years ago.
Yeah.
Like
Good call. Yeah.
they're like anybody who was any good from this program is already gone. So is I know this isn't. Are we sure that the person who's going to be head coach, like going to be coach, is better than their current coach?
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think we can like definitively say that's true, right? Like again, obviously the program can rebuild and they can get a better coach and a better team, but do we know that the person who's going to be in charge now is better than their current head coach? I don't think we know that.
Yeah, I'm gonna look up who their interim head coach is. Reed Stringer. What's his background here? I'm just curious which side of the ball he's on. Let's see if there's anything. Are you? Oh my goodness, this is interesting. I've never ever seen this before. Their interim coach is not their offensive coordinator. It's not their defensive coordinator.
Is it special teams? Was it like linebackers coach or
No, we could go through everything. It's their general manager. It's their personnel guy.
they have a general manager?
Yeah,
He just
maybe he works for free at Southern Miss. I don't know.
I don't even know what general college general managers do. I didn't think they
They basically act like lesser versions of NFL GMs in terms of fitting in recruits
but
and transfers
they don't even really so
with
what
NIL.
you've got like a guy who like files paperwork. He's the head coach.
No, he scouts and stuff.
All right. So that's the
This is like that Holiday Inn thing about I'm not a doctor, but I stayed at a Holiday Inn, so I'm a doctor. So now I'm the head coach at Southern Miss.
who's doing the recruiting then?
I could have had a lot of boy. I wish I'd known about that. That this could have been a really good thing in part one. We got a whole segment about this.
That's crazy. All right, we're gonna have to talk
I
about
missed the Narduzzi Award.
yeah, we're gonna have to do it next week. We'll see. Well, let's see if this goes really well. If this goes really poorly, then we're gonna give it an
Yeah,
Narduzzi award. If not, then we're gonna have a great story for next week as to how great
that's
this has gone.
amazing.
Yeah,
I'm so glad you brought that up. Thank you.
yeah,
Well done. All right. I really like this play.
yeah.
Oregon State is just inept on offense. They can run the ball well, but they cannot throw the ball. And if you watch that quarterback, it's not like he's just missing. I'll put it that way. I'm very comfortable just going one-on-one with anybody that can catch a ball at Oregon State because we never get to figure out if they can catch the ball. Oregon State really struggles on defense too. This is a horrible number. Yeah, Cal sneakily competent plus at offense. And like we talked about, their defense is elite. We both have Oregon State with 2 scores here. And it's just a matter of, all right, does Cal get that 5th score? Or fifth or sixth, or they stay on 4 or 5 here. But either way, neither of us has this close. If anything, I think these numbers might be a little high on the Oregon State side here.
Yeah, I agree. I think we might be a little high on Oregon State, but I love this one. This one's actually under 9.5 now. If you want this, so this is actually we're getting even better value. The 10.5 is
Yeah.
great, but it's 9.5. So yeah,
Yeah, good call. This was a 10 this morning. I like this next one more than I actually believe in Navy against Notre Dame. And you're going to say, what is wrong with you? Because, like I said, let's just back Spencer Petras here, buddy.
yeah,
All it took with Spencer Petras was to turn the offensive around for Utah State. He's the apex. Now, they started Bryson Barnes, so there's some real bad garbage in this 86 apex for Utah State. But Petras has an apex of 101 this season, and he has one of the best receivers in the Mountain West Conference. Guess who has like nothing at all going for them on either side of the ball? Wyoming. This is just dreck. Cannot pass the ball. Cannot run the ball at all. One of the least explosive passing games in all of FBS. Cannot stop the pass.
Maybe.
Comparatively, their best feature is that they're okay. I don't know. They're not horrible against the run, but they're near horrible, which is
It's what you want to hear.
I don't know. Charles Manson had some good parts to his personality, but it's a grim picture here. I've loved fading Wyoming, and I've got a proof of concept here. This passing game is better than what it says here, and I've got an explosive guy in Jalen Royals. Yeah, the offense or the defense is terrible, but let's see. I'll take my chances against this. We both have them by a score here, and Wyoming's giving 2.5, which is just a joke to me. Wyoming should be favored against anybody. It just this just I think we're just ahead of the market here.
Yeah, I agree with that. I like Utah State here. You can play them on the money line for a nice little plus like 115, 120. It's nice. I like it. Yeah, I see no reason to touch this. Just go with it. Go with a better quarterback. Yes, it's on the road, but it's Utah to Wyoming, so it's not the end of the world there. And Wyoming has been really bad this year since their head coach from last year retired. So I've been enjoying fading Wyoming as well. So let's go Aggies. I'm not sure what Utah State is. What are
Utah State Aggies.
they? Are
Yeah.
the Aggies? There's 8 Aggies.
All right. This one's almost just name your score. I'm not even really worried about throughout the record books aspect of a rivalry game because just what does Florida State do well? They have a almost this is below average for an ACC defense here. Miami's relative weak spot is their defense here, but man, I just look at these numbers up here. Florida State 53 apex, 12 GGAB. This is just horrible. This is just brutal. So if there's a team that can take advantage of a Miami relatively defensive as their weak spot, weak part of the team, it's not Florida State. And Miami is definitely a front runner team where, again, people should be more concerned about what our models say, and we have remarkably consistent scores here. But I'm very confident in Miami when they have a chance to really shut somebody out or shut them down and keep them to 10 points, they will. And defenses much better than Florida State's have struggled to deal with Miami's offense here. So I think there's a little bit of rivalry in this 21.5 number here because
Yeah.
this should be closer to, at least a touchdown more.
There's a lot of times we've seen Florida State beat up at Miami. This is a year that they get to get some semblance of revenge on them. And I think it's time that Miami got a nice, comfortable cover in there. They've had a lot of close games. This is a week they can just blow this team out, try some stuff. Again, like this Florida State defense is not particularly good. This Florida State offense is also not particularly good. Miami's offense is good. Their defense is not good, but their defense should be able to shut down this Florida State offense. Yeah, I like this one. Again, I am not on Miami team of destiny here, but I think Miami is
No.
definitely better than Florida State here.
Yeah, this is where they avoid, a dome one here. I'm a little concerned about this because Central Florida, like we talked about at the end of part one, reviewing last week, has been really Jekyll and Hyde. Who knows what their true identity is? We have this as an under. Now, I guess to the extent that we just say last week's BYU Oklahoma State game was just an aberration from a standpoint of the BYU defense and Oklahoma State offense, and BYU can retain form. Boy, that's the case here. But Jesus, Central Florida just lit up a really good Iowa State defense. Not often that I love that I'm going to have reservations about a dual model underplay. Usually this is two fists full of cash to bet on. I'm a little freaked out by that resurgence I saw last week by Central Florida. I'm not going to outguess the model here. The margin's not the best. Actually, what I'm going to do now that I see this, margin for including a defense this strong, the margin needs to be at least 5. So what I'm going to do is just pray that this total goes down to 53.5 and I don't have to make a decision actually bet it, but it's an underplay right now.
I think I do like
my book doesn't drop totals till tomorrow.
Yeah, I think I do the angle of this is preliminarily driven by that BYU defense, and specifically the defensive GGAB there of BYU, because that's clearly where the threat level of Central Florida is. The Central Florida has the 154 GGAB, right? I think BYU can shut them down. Again, they were actually they didn't. It wasn't a blowout against BYU, but they were still able to limit a somewhat okay Oklahoma State, BYU was able to limit a somewhat okay Oklahoma State rushing attack, right? I think they can do something similar here. I also don't think BYU's offense is particularly great. I think Central Florida has had a couple of games of not great, but then they did really good against Iowa State. Maybe that was just Iowa State's one game of, okay, we're not really good this week, but now we're going to come back. I'm not. I kind of still do like this under here. I'm not scared of it.
I admire your bravery, sir. All right. The matchup of teams that have embarrassed USC in the last minute here. Maryland at Minnesota. What sticks out to me here is just Minnesota's got an elite pass defense. This is just stingy as all get out here. 17 is just ridiculous. Maryland can't run the ball either. So that, I think, is, you look at that, and that's why you've got Maryland with 21. I got them with 15. We don't really have, we've got different results in terms of who wins, but we've got basically the same total of 37 with whatever defense here, but an elite defense on Minnesota, plus a really bad offense on Minnesota too. And my metrics are pace neutral, and Minnesota really loves to use the clock as well. So I like this under a lot more than the other under that we had, the BYU UCF thing. But Minnesota is just an ideal under team here.
Yeah. Maryland traveling west to Minnesota. It's a time zone, but it's only the central time zone. But not insignificant travel there. There is some that's not insignificant. That's several states over, and those are pretty big states. That's probably a what, 2 hour plane ride from Maryland, almost, yeah, probably 2 to 3 hours, I'd say, from Maryland. Because I'm trying to think. 'Cause I have a flight this week from Toronto to O'Hare to Chicago, and that's 2 hours. So that's
Probably about two.
what Maryland to Minnesota be
Minnesota.
further. Should be further than that. Almost like double the distance. Because it's like further.
Not to make this a travel log show, but I think a lot of that is just like going into O'Hare, and just a lot of it's just, okay, when do we actually land? And then we taxi for 20 minutes.
True.
Brutal airport.
That is true. All right, so fine. Maybe because they're definitely not flying into O'Hare if they're going into Minnesota. All right, fine. We'll call it 2.5 hours. Not the easiest road trip. Not the easiest road trip. But again, I do the under there. I think Maryland's offense is mostly just a passing attack, but Minnesota has a really good defense. Their offense is pretty bad.
Yeah.
Minnesota's been a pretty good under team this year. I think 46 is quite a lot of points. I think if this was like closer to 40, this was like a 38 or something, I wouldn't be touching this. But I think 46 is just maybe a tad too high. I think you're giving that Maryland offense a little bit too much credit there for probably the USC game.
Yeah. And again, they can't run the ball. They didn't really run the ball against USC, who's not a really great run defense. Their quarterbacks literally average 100 apex. That's the definition of average. They have this explosivity is basically Ty Felton, who I don't know if he's in the top 10 this week, but he's been in the top 10. To me, that just seems so ideal. From if I have a great pass defense right here and I just have to shut down one guy and I don't have to worry about stopping the run, that's so perfect for me if I'm Minnesota. And if, like, with my mediocre quarterback, I can just grind out 4 yards of run and an occasional just pass that doesn't suck. I don't know. Sneakily, this might be a game I really enjoy if it's not on Peacock. If this is actually like on Big Ten, this could be that under game that really I'm enjoying, because halftime it's 6-3 or some stupid score like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think this could be. I like this as an underplay. I think it could be really good. It could be really good underplay.
Yep. All right. Speaking of underplays, so here are the total plays from my model. We just talked about two here. One I love, one I respect and will play dutifully. The other one's here. Louisville, BC. Louisville is an over team, and I've got good enough margin here. 10 points here. Your model's on the same directionally. Indiana is an over team with that brutal. This is interesting because Washington's actually got a pretty good defense statistically, but Washington also is pretty functional on offense too. So this total 52 is basically like an average for all of FBS. I've got it at 63. You've got a field goal more, so you agree with that. We diverge on Nebraska to Ohio State. You've got this going slightly over. I've got this under just within the margin here at 5.5. If it's less than 5, then that's a no play. Love this. Ole Miss, Oklahoma will struggle to score. Oklahoma's got a good defense. I think this 42 might be a little high directionally. You're with me on here. JMU and Southern Miss, we talked about this. Southern Miss is just, I don't think they're going to score. LSU seems one of those pro forma over teams just because their defense is okay and their offense is exceptional. Not really wild about this, and your numbers are actually going the other way on this. You've got this pretty comfortably under. Talked about Kansas State. They're becoming an over team, and I've got this projected with a touchdown margin. You've got this going the other way, too. You've got this going under. I guess you're giving a lot of credit to the Kansas defense for some reason. And what do you know? I put Boston College and Louisville in there twice, but I don't like it that much. I only have it once. Strike this one, folks. When I do these on Sunday at the end of the day, I get a little loopy here. Of my plays outside the dual model, any thoughts on those?
I do a lot of those. That Louisville at Boston College is like a sneakily good overplay. Both of those don't have particularly good defenses, and both of them, like Boston College, they were in deep trouble against Virginia, and then they came back and I think almost tied the game, and then Virginia just quickly threw on a bunch of extra points. Or no, it wasn't Virginia. Who was it? Who they play last week? I can't remember. No, it wasn't Virginia. It was Virginia Tech. Yes.
Possibly, yeah.
Yeah, it was a team that they were like they were like 7 point dog 7.5 point dogs too, and then they were down 3 scores and they were like tied and they ended the game down 3 scores. So it was yeah, I actually I really like that one, that over. I like that one.
Yeah, my favorite of those is I think, like I said, Oklahoma and Ole Miss. Ole Miss good on so both sides of the ball. I really love Oklahoma is just an ideal under team. Just well, as long as they can just avoid giving up 2 touchdowns off turnovers like last week. And even then, it almost happened. It's just Mac. Just go Central Michigan here. Just
Yeah,
run the ball between the tackles, guys, and then you'll hit the under.
that's the thing, right? You take away those 14 points, it doesn't even get close to the over.
No. Yeah. All right, checking in on our preseason predictions, which we did not do last week in our abbreviated episode here. So since we last checked in, um, I hit one of my preseason upset predictions: UTEP over FIU and their 3 quarterbacks throwing 4 interceptions. Not that I saw that coming. You were on the wrong side of Sam Houston over Western Kentucky, although I like that play.
Even though Sam Houston closed the
Stanford,
favorite in that game too.
yeah, no, it was good value. If you not that there's a lot of look ahead lines on Sam Houston, Western Kentucky, but right call, not the right call. Stanford over SMU. Our guy Josh, I was with him for a little bit on Stanford, but yeah, as SMU's found themselves now. So this week you've got Nebraska over Ohio State, which is interesting. I wonder how you're looking at. Are you seeing Nebraska as exposed last week against Indiana? Are you seeing them as primed to show that was their worst of their worst and they're going to give Ohio State a much better showing?
I was thinking about that too, right? Because I saw the line. I think the line in that game is like 24 and a half. I have it about 20, so there is some value on the Nebraska spread there. I think it's interesting. I think Ohio State, I like the from what we've seen this year with the basically exception of last game, Ohio State, like, this would have been a really good play had they not gotten absolutely annihilated by Indiana last week. This spread would be like 14 and a half. I think basically you're adding almost 10 points of value just from that beat down. But I do Nebraska here. I think it's partly. I'm the more I think about them, if you start thinking, okay, maybe that was a look ahead spot for Nebraska. They were getting ready for Ohio State. Didn't do as much preparation for Indiana as they maybe should have done. Additionally, Ohio State, I think, has Penn State coming up after this game, right? So they could be looking ahead to Penn State, right? So I just think this Ohio State has not been tested the most. I think this is not. I'm not sitting here being like, man, this Ohio State team, really a good Ohio State team. Their biggest test was against Oregon. Oregon did win the game. It was a close game, but they did win that game. I think you could have a pissed off Nebraska team that's mad that they lost last week. They could be out for some blood this week. And if they've been thinking about this Ohio State game for a while, because I think it was before the new coach, before Matt Rule came to Nebraska, Ohio State. I think last year they didn't play, but in the years before then, Ohio State just took glee in annihilating Nebraska. They just absolutely crushed them year after year. And I'd imagine some of those kids are still around, a la Cam Rising, and are like, yeah, okay, we're pissed off at Ohio State and we want revenge on that. So I think there's a non-zero chance that Nebraska might be looking for some revenge here. So I think don't put it out of the realm of possibility. If this game is close, don't. If this game is close, it's not that big of a shock to me. I think there's a chance. Now, again, could this just be a blowout and Nebraska actually wasn't ready this year and it's going to be next year after Dylan Raiolas had another full year? Sure, I could see that. But at the same point in time, I could see a scenario where, yeah, no, Nebraska is legit and here to stay. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'll keep an eye on that one. That'll be interesting if it's still a game in the third quarter, because I think at some point you can get like that whole nervous energy of that you don't want it in a home stadium at Ohio State. So yeah, that'll be an interesting game.
Yeah.
And Robert, that is it for our week 9 preview. We get the honor and privilege of talking about the best sport twice a week, now 3 times a week, looking back and looking forward and then looking forward again. So thank you all for listening, viewing, and please check us out on Island Time to drop later this week. Until then, thank you so much, and we will talk to you soon.
See you, everybody.